Welcome. Welcome to our daily video. We're glad that you're here. We begin with two blessings. That has been our custom for all these days. The first blessing is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ho'oneh b'eit tzara. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who answers us in our time of crisis. Hayom shalosh ma'ot v'shemonim yomim lahaseger. This is the 380th day in our isolation. And Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy through the mitzvot, including this mitzvah, to busy ourselves with the study of Torah. Now we are in the middle of Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of Pesach, and the word Chol HaMoed is an interesting pairing of words. Chol means a weekday, Moed means a festival. It's a holiday these days in between, but it's not a holiday. And in some ways, it acts like a holiday, and in some ways, it acts like a regular, secular, normal day. Services are pretty much like they are on any given weekday. All elements are like the weekday service. There's none of the extra additions that we normally see on the services for Shabbat or for Yom Tov. But we still have Hallel, which is a holiday edition. We also have a Torah reading. The Torah reading we do during the week as well. But the Torah reading usually has only 3 aliyot. But on these days of Chol HaMoed, there are 4 aliyot. And it's not just one Torah like we take out on a regular day, but we take out 2 Torahs. And we read a section from the book of Numbers as well. There is on Chol HaMoed a Musaf service, which is usually associated with a holiday or Shabbat. But the Kedusha of that Musaf service is just like a weekday Kedusha. There's no extra things in it that we see on Shabbat or holidays. We're not allowed to mourn as if it is a holiday, and yet we are allowed to have funerals. These 4 intermediate days are spanning the first days that our people experienced freedom after the exodus from Egypt. They had told Pharaoh, Moses had told Pharaoh that they needed to make a 3-day journey into the wilderness in order to worship God. And Pharaoh has let them go to worship their God. Now, as these intermediate days take off, Pharaoh is beginning to realize that it's clear that Israel is not planning on coming back at all. So the army is mobilized, and they go chasing after them. And Egypt is now in pursuit of these renegade slaves in order to bring them back to their indentured servitude, bring them back to working for Pharaoh and for building Pharaoh's megacities. The stage is now set because of these in-between days. The stage is now set for the miracle at the sea that's commemorated on the 7th day of Pesach, the great rescue of the people of Israel, and the once and for all destruction of the Egyptian army. After all, if there was anything that the people of Israel feared during their time as slaves, they feared the Egyptian army, and now in just a blink, it was gone. And no more army, nothing for them to be afraid of anymore. There is no reason anymore for these former slaves to fear Egypt. They don't. There's no fear anymore that they'll be forced back into Egypt, and the women lead singing and dancing on the side of the shore, and with joy for this great redemption that once and for all the power of Egypt over them has been broken. But when we look at this story, and we look at it in terms of all the rest of the things that happened during their wanderings in the desert, we find that it was very easy to get Israel out of Egypt, to get Israel out of slavery. But it seems much more difficult and it will be a much harder occupation to get the slavery out of Israel. They have a slavery mindset that it's going to make it very hard for them to see themselves as free. Many times, not being forced back, but many times they'd be willing to just go back to Egypt, back to the life of slavery. They forget about the whip. They forget about the tortures. They only remember the good food that they ate, which wasn't really so good, the plentiful water that was there for them, and they didn't need to struggle every day to survive, forgetting the fact that in their work they were struggling to survive. It is all too often that we forget the good and only and only remember the bad things. We only see the bad things that are happening to us, and we look back to those good old days when things seem to be so much better. But they're not better. Going backwards is never a good thing to do. It is filled with great danger, and it is always filled, ultimately, with regrets.